Colin Johnson has many interesting things at his place in Iowa, like this air horn off the Henry Ford III steamship. But nothing attracts as much attention as his 1923 Waterloo Boy Model N. Colin first spotted this tractor while on a motorcycle ride in 1978, but it took several years to convince the owner to sell.
We stopped, I went in, talked to the owner. Dave Corlett, nice man. He had been a John Deere dealer, and he had always wanted to restore this. I asked him if he wanted to sell it. He said no. So for the next several years, I called Dave, and it was a standard procedure. I'd ask him, how he's doing, the normal conversation. And then I would always ask, you got the Waterloo Boy? And he'd say, yeah. I said, do you want to sell it? And he'd always say no. Well, after about 4 or 5 years of that, one evening in the winter, I called him up. We were talking. I said, Dave, you still have the Waterloo Boy? And he said, yes. I says, do you want to sell it? And he says, yes, and I want to sell it to you. So we negotiated a price and brought it home. And took a few years to get around to restoring it. It was missing the radiator, water pump, the engine was stuck. There were some little pieces missing, but we gathered up the parts, and either late 80s or early 90s, we fired it up, and we've been playing with it ever since.
Finding parts for a machine this old is tough. Luckily, some of them could be ordered straight from the local John Deere dealer. And one of Colin's friends had an idea on how to improvise with one of the more difficult repairs.
The cone clutch on the tractor needed a fabric webbing, and he looked at me and he says, give me your belt. I was wearing one of the green military belts, and so we riveted that on so we had a clutch brake. And that lasted several years. I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago I had to replace the belt.
Colin decided to keep the tractor looking much like it did when he found it, so no fresh paint job. He also left the exhaust in its unique location.
I left this tractor as original as I found it in Colorado, and the previous owner apparently did not like the exhaust right underneath him and hitting the ground and the sound echoing up and the dirt flying. So he put a large piece of pipe on and brought it to the front. That's not factory at all, but and then he had baling wire to suspend it, and I've just left it the way I found it.
Not a lot of people have ever had a chance to drive a Waterloo Boy, which handles surprisingly well despite its age.
The early Waterloo Boys had a front axle that was a chain wind-up spool affair, but in the late teens they came out with this newer, improved Waterloo Boy, and it has a regular automotive type steering, so it's geared down with a worm gear, and it's very easy to handle. As clumsy as it looks, it's a very smooth, operator friendly tractor. For a tractor of that age, it handles extremely well and easily. Very dependable with a 2-cylinder engine.
Ah yes, that engine. Those 2 cylinders have their own unique sound. It's a sound that attracts lots of fans.
Yeah, John Deere's have an unusual beat. The way they fire is very unusual, and it's that special pop. I grew up in a neighborhood of John Deere's. When I was a kid, I remember on a summer day you could hear the neighbors with the John Deere's, the 530, 630, 730s of the age, and you could hear them, a quarter mile away, the neighbors working in the fields. It's kind of a rare sound today unless you go to a tractor show. John Deere stayed with that 2-cylinder design up until 1960 when they introduced the 3010s, 4010s. So it was a very simple, basic, good design. One unique feature is there's 2 little cream bottles on top of the engine. And it's not really a gauge of oil pressure, but it's a gauge that shows the oil is pumping. They will pop up in the little deals, and you can just see it in the cream bottle, the oil coming up, and then it drops right down onto the connecting rods of each cylinder, which is kind of a unique, weird little feature.
However, getting that engine running takes a bit of effort.
Everything has got to be done manually. I turn the fuel on, I have to prime it with gas. There's 2 little petcocks on the top of the cylinder, drop in a little bit of gas, and there's a crank that goes on the right side of the crankshaft, and turn it over, and hopefully if everything goes, it starts.
Colin knows the odds are slim he'll ever again stumble upon something as rare as this Waterloo Boy.
In the early 70s, the tractor collecting was more or less in its infancy. So there was easy stuff to find. I mean, just sitting next to a barn or in a grove, and we picked up a lot of local tractors that, you know, were past their use age and nobody wanted them. To find something just sitting out in the open today is virtually nearly impossible.
But that doesn't mean Colin won't keep trying to find great new pieces to add to his collection, while continuing to make friends along the way.
My tastes far exceed my budget. It's the problem at this point. It started out to be probably the love and passion of collecting, but after doing this since the early 70s, and as I've gotten older, what has become more important is the friendships and ties to people all over the country. I put a value on that, and long-term friends and good people.